Can you imagine the pain of having your greatest sacrifice turned into a cruel joke in front of a crowd? On a bustling Saturday morning, May 17th, 2025, at 9:47 a.m. in a busy airport terminal, retired Sergeant Daniel R. Carter, a decorated war hero, faced a moment of heartbreak that would leave anyone stunned. A smug TSA agent openly ridiculed the gleaming prosthetic leg that Daniel had earned through unimaginable sacrifice, a replacement for the limb he lost to an IED explosion in Kandahar, Afghanistan. The agent's mocking laughter echoed through the checkpoint, a sound that cut deeper than any wound, stripping away the dignity of a man who had given so much for his country. But just 10 minutes later, a pilot's bold act of justice turned this moment of shame into one of profound honor, reminding us all of the respect our veterans deserve. This is a story of resilience, dignity, and the power of standing up for what's right, a tale that will leave you both outraged and inspired. Daniel, a 72-year-old former bomb disposal expert, had spent 3 decades serving his country with unwavering dedication, disarming explosives in some of the most dangerous corners of the world. Airports, however, were a battlefield of a different kind. The chaos of crowds, the endless lines, and the cold indifference of security checks clashed with the disciplined, purposeful life he once knew. His prosthetic leg, a cutting-edge marvel of titanium and carbon fiber with microprocessors that enabled a natural stride, was both a blessing and a burden. While it allowed him to walk again, it also triggered every metal detector, drawing inevitable delays and uncomfortable scrutiny. Today, Daniel was on his way to his grandson's high school graduation in Seattle, a moment of pride he wouldn't miss for the world, a chance to see the boy he'd fought for cross a milestone. Yet, as he approached the TSA checkpoint, a familiar dread settled in his chest, whispering fears of judgment and ridicule that he'd faced too many times before. At Daily Narrated Stories, we believe in honoring the sacrifices of veterans like Daniel, heroes who've given so much for our freedom. If you're moved by stories of courage, justice, and the fight for dignity, type respect in the comments below. We're on a mission to share these powerful narratives, but we need your help to reach more people. Please hit that subscribe button now and join our community in celebrating the bravery of those who've served. Let's make sure their stories are heard far and wide. Daniel had prepared for the inevitable security routine, a ritual he'd endured countless times since losing his leg in Afghanistan. Dressed in a pressed navy polo shirt, khaki pants that discreetly covered most of his prosthetic, and a light gray jacket, he carried his military ID and a letter from his VA doctor explaining the medical necessity of his device. The terminal at 9:47 a.m. on Saturday, May 17th, 2025, was a cacophony of sounds. Announcements crackling over the intercom, the hum of rolling suitcases, and the murmur of hurried travelers. Daniel navigated the crowd with a measured gait, his prosthetic leg clicking softly against the polished floor, a sound that grounded him amidst the chaos. As he approached the TSA checkpoint, he took a deep breath, the sterile scent of disinfectant filling his lungs, and mentally braced himself for what he knew would come. He stepped through the metal detector, its arch looming like a judgmental sentinel, and the shrill alarm pierced the air, a jarring sound that turned every head in the vicinity. All eyes locked onto him, a mix of curiosity and impatience, and a young TSA agent named Ethan Brooks, with a smirk that betrayed his inexperience, motioned him aside with a lazy wave of his hand. "Step over here, sir," Ethan said, his voice dripping with impatience, as if Daniel's very presence was an inconvenience to his otherwise mundane day. "Looks like we've got a live one. What's the deal with that leg? Smuggling some contraband, are we?" The words hit Daniel like a slap, a sharp sting that echoed the countless indignities he'd faced since returning to civilian life. He steadied himself, drawing on the discipline that had carried him through years of service, his broad shoulders squaring instinctively. "It's a prosthetic leg, officer," he replied calmly, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him, a tempest of anger and shame he fought to keep at bay. He reached for his carry-on to retrieve the letter, his fingers brushing against the worn leather of the bag, its texture a tactile reminder of the life he'd led before the explosion. The letter was creased from years of use, its edges yellowed, but it bore the official seal of the Department of Veterans Affairs, a shield against the scrutiny he so often faced. "It's medically necessary, and I have documentation," he added, holding the paper out with a hand that trembled ever so slightly, not from fear, but from the effort of restraint. Ethan waved a dismissive hand, barely glancing at the papers Daniel offered, his eyes glinting with a mix of boredom and amusement. "Sure, everyone's got a story," he scoffed, pointing at the sleek, metallic upper portion of the prosthetic where it connected to Daniel's thigh. The titanium glinted under the harsh fluorescent lights of the terminal, a stark reminder of the explosion that had changed his life forever, its surface catching the light in a way that made it look almost otherworldly. "This thing's setting off alarms like it's a ticking time bomb. Looks more like something from a futuristic war movie than a VA handout," Ethan chuckled, turning to a nearby colleague with a grin that was more sneer than smile. "Hey, Sarah, come take a look at Iron Man over here." Sarah, a seasoned TSA agent with kind eyes and a weary expression, glanced over from her station, her hands pausing mid-task as she processed Ethan's words. She offered Daniel a sympathetic nod, her lips pressing into a thin line of disapproval at Ethan's behavior, before shaking her head and returning to her duties. Her silent reprimand did little to deter Ethan, whose smirk widened as he doubled down on his taunts, feeding off the power he wielded in that moment. "What is this, anyway? Some kind of secret weapon? Building a robot army in your basement?" he continued, his voice loud enough to draw the attention of nearby passengers, who shifted uncomfortably, their whispers a soft buzz in the air. The casual cruelty of his words struck Daniel like a physical blow, each syllable a dagger that pierced through the armor of his stoicism. His prosthetic wasn't just a piece of technology. It was a symbol of survival, a testament to the day in Kandahar when an IED blast tore through his squad, leaving him bleeding in the sand, his leg gone, his comrades' screams echoing in his ears. He could still feel the searing pain, the acrid smell of smoke and burnt flesh, the weight of his fallen brothers as he dragged himself to safety, his hands clawing at the dirt, his mind a haze of adrenaline and grief. And then there were the months of grueling rehab, the endless nights of phantom pain that woke him in a cold sweat, the first shaky steps he took on this very prosthetic, determined to walk again for his family, to be the grandfather his grandson deserved. The memories flooded back unbidden, each one a weight that pressed against his chest, making it hard to breathe. He saw his wife's face, her eyes brimming with tears as she held his hand in the hospital, her voice a whisper of encouragement. "You're stronger than this, Daniel," she'd said, her grip firm despite the tremble in her fingers. He saw his grandson, just a toddler then, perched on a hospital chair, his chubby hands clapping as Daniel took those first steps, his innocent cheer a lifeline in the darkness. "You can do it, Grandpa," the boy had exclaimed, his voice a melody of hope that Daniel clung to even now. But Ethan's mockery tainted that memory, turning a moment of triumph into one of shame, the laughter a cruel echo that drowned out his grandson's voice. "This is a Department of Defense-issued prosthetic," Daniel said, his voice low and trembling with restrained fury, the heat rising in his cheeks, his eyes burning with unshed tears. "I lost my leg serving this country in Afghanistan. It helps me walk. There's nothing funny about it." But Ethan was too caught up in his power trip to care, too intoxicated by his perceived authority, his ego inflated by the badge on his chest. "Afghanistan, huh? Right. And I'm a superhero," he sneered, rolling his eyes with exaggerated disdain, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Rules are rules, pal. That leg needs a full secondary screening, visual checks, swabs, the whole deal. We can't have any surprises at 35,000 feet, can we?" He motioned toward a frosted glass cubicle for private screenings, his tone laced with mockery, his gesture lazy and dismissive. "Take a seat. This might take a while. Don't let it short-circuit on us." Daniel bit back, the retort burning in his throat, his jaw clenching so tightly he could hear his teeth grinding, the sound of faint echo in his ears. He knew losing his temper would only escalate the situation, giving Ethan more fuel to prolong the ordeal, a twisted game where Daniel was the unwilling pawn. As he walked to the cubicle, his good leg ached with tension, the muscles protesting the strain, and the prosthetic felt heavier than ever. A glaring spotlight for Ethan's cruelty, its mechanical hum a reminder of his vulnerability. The air in the cubicle was stale, the walls closing in like a vice, the frosted glass blurring the outside world into a haze of shapes and shadows. Daniel sat on the hard plastic chair, the seat cold against his back, and stared at the floor, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, his knuckles white with the effort of holding himself together. The memories continued to assault him, each one a vivid snapshot of a life marked by sacrifice. He remembered the day he'd received the prosthetic, the sterile white room at the VA hospital, the doctor's careful explanation of its features, the microprocessors, the lightweight titanium, the carbon fiber shell designed to mimic a natural gait. He remembered the pride he'd felt, the hope that he could reclaim some semblance of normalcy, the determination to walk unaided to his grandson's first school play, to be there for the moments that mattered. But now, in this cramped cubicle, that pride felt like a distant dream, replaced by a gnawing sense of degradation. The secondary screening was a slow, humiliating process that seemed designed to break him, each step a deliberate assault on his dignity. Another agent, a middle-aged woman with a professional demeanor, conducted an intrusive pat-down, running gloved hands over Daniel's body with clinical precision, her movements mechanical but not unkind. Her badge read, Agent Lopez, and her eyes held a flicker of sympathy as she worked, a silent acknowledgement of the ordeal Daniel was enduring. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, sir," she murmured, her voice soft but firm, a stark contrast to Ethan's sneering tone. "We have to follow protocol." Daniel nodded, his throat too tight to speak, his gaze fixed on a scuff mark on the floor, its jagged edges a mirror to the chaos in his mind. The repetitive questions, "What is this device? Have you traveled with it before? Where are you stationed?" felt like an interrogation, each one chipping away at his resolve, exposing the raw edges of his pain. Agent Lopez swabbed his leg and belongings with meticulous care, the swabs beeping softly as they were analyzed for explosive traces, the sound of faint, rhythmic pulse that matched the pounding of Daniel's heart. Ethan lingered nearby, his presence a constant thorn in Daniel's side, his whispers carrying just enough for Daniel to hear, each word a fresh wound. "Think it'll turn into a rocket launcher mid-flight?" he murmured to a colleague, followed by a stifled laugh that grated on Daniel's nerves, the sound like nails on a chalkboard. "Or maybe it's got a hidden blade. Better check for ninjas," Ethan added, his voice low but deliberate, his amusement a cruel taunt that echoed in the small space. Each second dragged on like an eternity, the ticking of Daniel's watch a cruel reminder of time slipping away, its hands moving with agonizing slowness. He glanced at the watch, its face a familiar comfort, a gift from his wife on their 20th anniversary, the inscription on the back, "Forever yours," a promise that had carried him through the darkest days. It was 9:58 a.m. Boarding for his flight to Seattle would start in 10 minutes, and the gate was a 15-minute walk away, a distance that felt insurmountable under Ethan's scrutiny. Daniel's thoughts raced to his grandson, waiting proudly in his cap and gown, a moment Daniel had dreamed of witnessing since the boy was born. He pictured the auditorium, the rows of folding chairs, the stage adorned with banners in the school's colors, blue and gold, the air filled with the hum of proud families. He imagined his grandson's smile, the way his eyes would light up when he spotted Daniel in the crowd, the hug they'd share after the ceremony, the boy's arms strong and sure. But that vision was overshadowed by a growing fear, a cold dread that settled in his stomach like a stone. Would he miss the graduation because of this? The thought twisted his gut, a sharp pang of fear and regret that made his chest ache, his breath hitching as he fought to stay composed. He tried to explain again, his voice cracking with desperation, the weight of his words heavy in the air. "I'm traveling for my grandson's graduation," he said, his eyes pleading with Agent Lopez, who paused briefly, her hand hovering over the swab machine. "This prosthetic has been cleared countless times. I can't miss this. It's his big day." Ethan, overhearing, shrugged with a cold indifference that chilled Daniel to the bone, his expression unyielding. "We'll finish when we finish," he said, his tone devoid of empathy, his eyes glinting with a perverse satisfaction. "Safety first, even if it means you miss your little family party." The screening dragged on, each moment a test of Daniel's endurance, his patience stretched to its breaking point. Agent Lopez worked methodically, her movements precise, but the process was exhaustive, swabbing every inch of the prosthetic, running the swabs through multiple tests, checking Daniel's bag with a thoroughness that felt excessive. Daniel's mind wandered to the countless times he'd faced similar scrutiny, the airports where he'd been treated with respect, the agents who'd thanked him for his service, their voices warm with gratitude. But Ethan was different, a stark reminder of the indifference that still lingered in a world Daniel had fought to protect. He thought of the letters he'd received from his grandson over the years, the crayon drawings of soldiers, the scrawled notes that read, "You're my hero, Grandpa." Those letters were tucked away in a box at home, each one a treasure, a reminder of why he'd endured the pain, the surgeries, the long road to recovery. Finally, the screening ended, with nothing found, just as Daniel knew it would be, the machine's green light a silent vindication of his innocence. Agent Lopez offered a small, apologetic smile as she handed him his belongings, her voice soft. "You're clear to go, sir. I'm sorry for the delay." Daniel gathered his things, his hands trembling with a mix of suppressed rage and exhaustion, his fingers fumbling with the zipper of his bag, the leather slippery under his sweaty palms. He felt stripped of dignity, reduced to a spectacle in front of strangers, the weight of their pitying stares pressing down on him like a physical force. As he fastened his belt, the metal buckle cold against his fingers, preparing to rush to his gate, a commotion erupted near the main checkpoint, the noise a sudden jolt that snapped him out of his daze. A deep, commanding voice cut through the airport noise, its authority undeniable, a beacon of hope in the midst of despair. "I'm looking for a TSA agent named Brooks. He was just involved in screening a passenger with a prosthetic leg, Colonel Daniel Carter." "Where is he?" Ethan, who had been smirking near the cubicle's exit, froze, his face draining of color, his earlier bravado evaporating like mist, his eyes wide with a fear that mirrored Daniel's earlier dread. He recognized that tone, the voice of someone who demanded respect, someone who outranked everyone in the vicinity. The man striding through the checkpoint, bypassing the lines with a flash of credentials, was Captain Michael Evans, the lead pilot of Flight 342 to Seattle, his presence a commanding force that silenced the terminal. Michael, a former Navy aviator in his early 50s, carried himself with the unshakable authority of someone who'd seen combat, his posture ramrod straight, his sharp eyes scanning the area like a hawk, missing nothing. His uniform was impeccable, the gold stripes on his epaulets catching the light, a symbol of his rank and responsibility. Known for his dedication to passengers, especially veterans, Michael had a personal reason for his fierce advocacy. His father had been a Vietnam War veteran who struggled with PTSD, and Michael had grown up witnessing the lack of respect his father often faced, the dismissive comments, the averted gazes. Those memories fueled Michael's resolve, a fire that burned brightly as he sought justice for those who'd served. Today, he'd been tipped off by Sarah, who had discreetly informed a gate agent about Ethan's behavior toward Daniel, passing along the veteran's name and flight number with a quiet urgency. "Agent Brooks?" Michael's voice was calm, but carried an edge of steel as he approached, his polished shoes clicking against the tiled floor, each step a declaration of intent. "I'm Captain Evans, pilot of Flight 342. I've received a report about your treatment of one of my passengers, Colonel Carter, a decorated veteran who lost his legs serving this country." Ethan stammered, his bravado crumbling like a house of cards, his hands fidgeting nervously at his sides, his fingers twitching as if searching for something to hold on to. "Sir, I was just following protocol." His prosthetic set off alarms. It looked unusual. Michael's gaze turned icy, his eyes narrowing as he stepped closer, his presence looming over Ethan like a storm cloud. Unusual? It's a military-grade prosthetic, Agent Brooks, designed for heroes who've made sacrifices you can't begin to understand. Did you check his documentation? Did you show him the respect every passenger deserves, let alone a wounded warrior? Ethan faltered, his voice barely a whisper, his hands now clasped tightly in front of him, a futile shield against Michael's scrutiny. We did the screening, sir, as required, he mumbled, his eyes darting to the floor, unable to meet Michael's piercing gaze. Michael's tone remained steady but cutting, each word a precise strike, a scalpel slicing through Ethan's excuses. And did that screening require you to mock his prosthetic as a futuristic weapon? Did it require you to humiliate a man who's endured more than you'll ever know? The weight of Michael's words silenced the nearby agents and passengers, who turned to watch the confrontation unfold, their faces a mix of shock and admiration. Some nodded in approval, their expressions a quiet support for Daniel. Others pulled out their phones to record the moment, sensing a story worth sharing, their whispers a soft hum in the background. Ethan looked like a deer in headlights, his earlier arrogance replaced by fear, his shoulders slumping under the weight of scrutiny, his breath shallow and quick. Michael turned to Daniel, his expression softening with genuine warmth, a stark contrast to the steel in his voice moments before, his eyes reflecting a deep respect. "Colonel Carter, I'm Captain Michael Evans. I'm deeply sorry for the disgraceful treatment you've endured today. It's unacceptable, and I won't stand for it." Daniel, still reeling from the ordeal, managed a tired nod, his throat tight with emotion, his hands clasped tightly in his lap to steady himself. "Thank you, Captain. I just want to get to my grandson's graduation," he said, his voice soft but heavy with the weight of the day. Michael's resolve hardened, his jaw set with determination, a fire in his eyes that spoke of a man who wouldn't rest until justice was served. "And you will, Colonel. I'll make sure of it." He turned back to Ethan, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument, his authority a tangible force in the air. "Agent Brooks, you will apologize to Colonel Carter for your unprofessional and offensive behavior." Now, under Michael's piercing glare and the silent judgment of his peers, Ethan muttered a barely audible apology, his eyes glued to the floor, his voice trembling with reluctance, the words barely a whisper. "Louder," Michael commanded, his tone as unyielding as granite, his arms crossed over his chest, his stance unwavering. Ethan repeated the apology, his voice slightly clearer but laced with resentment, the words forced out like bitter medicine, his face flushed with a mix of shame and defiance. "That's not enough," Michael said sharply, his disappointment palpable, his gaze never wavering. He turned to the TSA supervisor, who had rushed over, her face pale with alarm, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, her eyes wide with concern. "Supervisor, I'm filing a formal complaint against Agent Brooks for harassing a disabled veteran. I expect a thorough investigation and disciplinary action. I also demand a review of your team's training on handling passengers with disabilities and prosthetics." The supervisor nodded vigorously, her hands clasped tightly as she assured Michael that the matter would be addressed immediately, her voice a rapid stream of promises and apologies. Michael then turned to Daniel, a small smile breaking through his stern demeanor, his eyes warm with respect, a glimmer of kindness in his expression. "Colonel, I believe your original seat was in economy, correct?" Daniel nodded, his voice soft, his hands finally relaxing in his lap. "My grandson booked it for me." Michael's smile widened, a glimmer of kindness in his expression, his voice softening with genuine care. "As the captain of this flight, I have the authority to adjust seating, especially for passengers who've been wronged. We have an open seat in first class. I'd be honored if you'd accept it, with the utmost respect from me and my crew." Daniel blinked, caught off guard by the gesture, his heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and disbelief, a warmth spreading through his chest that he hadn't felt in hours. "Captain, that's incredibly kind, but it's not necessary," he said, his voice thick with emotion, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Michael placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, his touch steady and grounding, a silent promise of support. "It is necessary, Colonel. Please, let this be a small token of amends for what you've been through. Allow me to escort you to the gate and onto the plane myself." And so, Daniel R. Carter, who had been mocked and degraded just moments before, was personally escorted through the airport by Captain Michael Evans. Passengers whispered in admiration as they passed, some offering nods of respect, others capturing the moment on their phones, eager to share the story of a pilot standing up for a veteran. The terminal buzzed with quiet awe, the air thick with a newfound reverence, a collective recognition of a wrong being righted. Daniel settled into the spacious first-class seat on Flight 342, the soft leather a stark contrast to the cold humiliation of the TSA checkpoint. The flight attendants, briefed by Michael, treated him with quiet reverence, offering refreshments and warm smiles, their actions a silent acknowledgement of his sacrifice. Agent Ethan Brooks was immediately removed from duty, pending the investigation Michael had demanded, his absence a small but significant victory. Word of the incident, a pilot confronting a TSA agent over the mistreatment of a veteran and upgrading him to first class, spread like wildfire through the airport and onto social media, where passengers' videos and posts went viral, racking up thousands of shares and comments of support. The TSA issued a formal apology to Daniel that evening, their statement emailed to him as he sat in his hotel room in Seattle, reflecting on the day's events. They also announced a comprehensive review of their training protocols for interacting with travelers with disabilities and medical devices, a step toward change that Daniel hoped would spare others the pain he'd endured. He arrived at his grandson's graduation on time, the ordeal at the airport fading into a bittersweet memory as he stood proudly in the crowd. His prosthetic leg, once a source of shame in that terminal, now felt like a badge of honor as he watched his grandson cross the stage, diploma in hand, a wide smile lighting up the boy's face. The applause of the crowd mingled with the warmth in Daniel's chest, a moment of pure joy that made every struggle worth it. This story is a powerful reminder that the scars of service, whether visible like Daniel's prosthetic or hidden deep within, deserve our deepest respect, not ridicule. It's a testament to the resilience of veterans like Daniel, who carry the weight of their sacrifices with quiet dignity, and to the courage of individuals like Captain Evans, who remind us that justice and humanity can prevail, even in the face of indifference. It's a call to reflect on the way we treat those who've given so much for our freedom, a challenge to ensure that every veteran is met with the honor they deserve. Have you witnessed an act of kindness or advocacy for a veteran that moved you? Share your story in the comments below. We'd love to hear how these heroes have touched your life, and your words might inspire others to act with compassion. At Daily Narrated Stories, we're dedicated to sharing narratives that inspire change, foster gratitude, and honor those who've served our country. But we can't do it without you. If this story stirred your heart and reminded you of the sacrifices veterans make every day, don't let this moment pass. Subscribe to Daily Narrated Stories right now. We're on a mission to share more life-changing tales that uplift and inspire, and we need your support to keep going. Hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, or share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Time is fleeting, and your action today can help us amplify the voices of heroes like Daniel. Let's honor them together, because at Daily Narrated Stories, we believe every veteran deserves first-class respect every single day.